My name is Daniel, and this happened about 2 years ago, not long after my wife and I moved into our first rented house together. It was a one-story place in a quiet neighborhood in Arizona. Nothing fancy, beige walls, gravel yard, and a street that felt like it hadn't changed since the early 2000s. We picked it because it felt safe, quiet, predictable. That feeling didn't last long. The first thing we noticed was how close the houses were. You could stand in our driveway and hear conversations from the neighbor's yard if they spoke loudly enough. On our right lived a family with 2 kids. On the left was a single man who lived alone. His name was Trevor. We learned that because he introduced himself the very first day. We were unloading boxes from the moving truck when he walked over, smiling wide, hands in his pockets like he was nervous or excited, maybe both. He told us he'd lived there for years and said it was nice to finally see young people move in. At the time, it felt welcoming. Looking back, it felt like something else. Trevor was in his late 30s, maybe early 40s, tall, thin, always wearing the same baseball cap. He talked a little too much and laughed a little too hard at things that weren't really funny. But again, we brushed it off. Some people just don't have great social skills. For the first week or so, nothing strange happened. Then we started noticing how often Trevor was outside. Every time we left for work, he was watering his plants. Every time we came home, he was taking out the trash. Every time we walked the dog, he was in his garage organizing. It didn't matter what time it was. It always felt like a coincidence, until it didn't. One night, my wife casually mentioned something that made my stomach drop. She asked me how long I thought Trevor had been watching our dog. I asked her what she meant. She told me that earlier that day, Trevor had leaned over the fence and said, "You're usually back from walking him by 7:20, right?" She laughed when she told me like it was a joke. I didn't laugh, because she was right. We were usually back by 7:20. We told ourselves he probably just noticed us passing by. Same schedule, same route, normal neighbor stuff. But over the next few weeks, the comments continued. He knew which days my wife worked late. He knew which nights I cooked dinner. He knew when we went grocery shopping. Once he asked if my wife was feeling better after being sick. We hadn't told anyone she was sick. That was the first time we felt genuinely uneasy. Things escalated one night when our power went out. It was around 11 p.m. The house went completely dark, and a second later, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number. "Looks like your power's out. You okay over there?" I remember staring at my phone, confused, before realizing something that made my chest tighten. We had never given Trevor our phone numbers. Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. When I looked through the peephole, Trevor was standing there with a flashlight, smiling. He said he just wanted to make sure we were safe. I didn't open the door. I thanked him through the door and told him we were fine. He stood there a few seconds longer than necessary before finally walking away. That night, neither of us slept. After that, we became more careful. Curtains always closed, doors always locked. We stopped following our usual routines. That's when things got worse. Trevor started showing up at odd hours, standing in his yard late at night, sitting in his car without going anywhere, walking past our house slowly, over and over. One morning, I found muddy footprints outside our bedroom window. They were facing inward. We installed cameras that same day. For a while, things went quiet. Trevor stopped coming outside as much. We thought maybe he realized we were uncomfortable and backed off. Then one night, around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a camera alert. There was movement in our backyard. When I opened the footage, my blood ran cold. Trevor was standing just outside our back door, not knocking, not moving, just standing there, staring at the door. He stayed like that for almost a full minute before slowly turning and walking back to his house. The next morning, we called the police. They came, talked to him, and told us there was nothing they could do. He claimed he was sleepwalking and didn't remember leaving his house. No charges, no warning. After that, we decided to leave. We broke our lease, lost our deposit, and packed up within 2 weeks. On the last day, as we were loading the final boxes into the car, Trevor stood at the edge of his driveway watching us. He waved. As we pulled away, my wife checked her phone. She had one last message from the unknown number. "You forgot to lock the back window last night." We never went back to that house. And sometimes, even now, when my phone buzzes late at night from a number I don't recognize, I still feel like he's watching. My name is Eric, and this happened in early 2022 when my girlfriend Jenna and I moved into our first rental house together. It was a small, one-story place in a quiet neighborhood outside a mid-sized city. Nothing fancy, just a basic street with identical houses, trimmed lawns, and the kind of silence that makes you think nothing bad could ever happen there. We were both in our mid-20s and excited to finally live somewhere that wasn't an apartment with paper-thin walls. The first week was normal. We unpacked, met a few neighbors, and settled into a routine. The couple across the street introduced themselves and brought over cookies. The guy next door on our left waved when he saw us moving in. But the house on our right was different. We never saw anyone outside. The blinds were always shut. The driveway had a dark blue sedan parked in the exact same spot every day, but no one ever got in or out of it while we were around. At night, sometimes one light would be on in the living room, but that was it. No music, no TV noise, nothing. About 5 days after we moved in, I finally saw the neighbor. I was taking trash out around 10 p.m. when his front door opened. A man stepped out, maybe mid-40s thin, wearing a gray hoodie. He froze when he saw me, like he didn't expect anyone to be outside. Then he gave a quick, stiff wave and walked to his car. He didn't drive away. He just sat in the driver's seat for about 5 minutes with the engine off, then got back out and went inside. I told Jenna about it and we both laughed it off. Some people are just awkward, but then small things started happening. One night, Jenna asked if I had been outside around 2 a.m. I told her no. She said she heard footsteps in the gravel along the side of our house, right outside the bedroom window. We figured maybe it was an animal. We had raccoons in the area. A few nights later, I heard it too. Slow footsteps, not random like an animal, deliberate, like someone pacing back and forth beside the wall. I looked through the blinds but didn't see anyone. The side yard was dark and the streetlight didn't reach that far. The footsteps stopped after a minute. We didn't call the police. We didn't want to overreact. Then Jenna started noticing something during the day. Every time she pulled into the driveway after work, the blinds in the neighbor's front window would shift slightly, just enough to tell someone inside was watching. If she looked directly at the window, the blinds would snap shut. One afternoon, she texted me while I was at work. "Your neighbor just walked across our backyard." I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She said she saw him from the kitchen window. He walked along the fence line slowly, like he was inspecting it, then stepped back into his yard. He didn't knock, didn't say anything, just walked through like it was normal. That night, I went over and knocked on his door. He answered after about 30 seconds. Same guy, same gray hoodie, same stiff smile. I told him we noticed him in our yard earlier and asked if everything was okay. He apologized immediately and said he was checking a loose fence panel because he thought it might be on his side. The thing is, the fence panel he mentioned was nowhere near where Jenna saw him. I let it go. I didn't want to escalate things with someone we had to live next to. But after that, the footsteps at night got more frequent. Sometimes they would circle the house. Front yard to side yard to backyard, always late, always slow, always stopping if we turned on a light. We bought a cheap security camera and pointed it toward the backyard. The first night it recorded something I almost wished it hadn't. At 2:17 a.m., the camera caught our neighbor standing in the middle of our yard, not moving, just standing there facing our bedroom window. He stayed like that for almost 4 minutes. Then he walked up to the camera, leaned in close, and smiled. The next morning, the footage was gone from the camera's memory card, completely wiped. We hadn't touched it. That's when we decided to call the police. An officer came out and knocked on his door. The neighbor told them he had no idea what we were talking about and claimed he'd been asleep. Without clear footage, there wasn't much they could do. They told us to call again if anything else happened. That same night, around midnight, we heard our back gate creak open. I grabbed a flashlight and looked out the window. He was in the yard again, this time crouched near the back door like he was examining the lock. I shouted that I was calling the police. He didn't run. He stood up slowly, looked directly at the window, and walked back to his house like nothing happened. We called again. Same result, no proof. 2 nights later, things escalated. Nights later, we woke up to a loud bang from the living room. When I ran out, the back door was slightly open. The lock had deep scratch marks around it, like someone had been trying to pry it. On the floor just inside the doorway was a small piece of paper. It said, "You shouldn't have moved here." That was enough for us. We broke our lease early and moved out within a week. The landlord didn't even argue when we explained. He just looked tired and said we weren't the first tenants to leave because of the neighbor. Months later, I looked up the address out of curiosity. The man next door had been arrested 2 weeks after we left. Police found multiple hidden cameras pointed into neighboring yards and windows. They also found a notebook filled with dates, times, and descriptions of the people who lived around him, us included. I still think about one detail that never sat right with me. In the notebook, under our names, the last entry was dated the night before we moved out. It said, "Ready to go inside soon." If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more weekly horror. On screen now is the most recent upload and the most viewed story on the channel. Pick your next one carefully, and remember, some stories are better not listened to alone.